Hello, and welcome to my review of The Bone People by Keri Hulme. Hulme? This was part of the challenge of around the year in 52 books. The Bone People is about a woman named Carowind. I think that's how you say her name. Carowind. She's a part Maori and part European woman who lives in a tower she built off the coast of New Zealand. She's introverted, she keeps to herself, she struggles with depression, and in turn that affects her art, which she feels she's no longer good at. And one day, when she comes home in one of the rooms in her twisty tower, she finds a young blonde boy that's just like hiding in the room. Through calling some people, she finds the boy's foster father, who is well known. They live in this tiny town. Who's well known, and the boy is known too. So she takes care of the boy for the rest of the day because the father can't quite make it because he works a lot. She ends up getting to know them. The foster father's name is Joe. The boy's name is Simon. Simon is a mute, so he doesn't really communicate very well. He doesn't know sign language, so he kind of has his own way of speaking with his hands. Since Carowind doesn't really understand what he's trying to tell her, he writes notes on a pad for her. She kind of reluctantly starts becoming Joe and Simon's friends. They are definitely more adamant about it than she is. She doesn't really care if they are around necessarily. So she ends up learning that Joe is a widower. His wife had passed a few years prior, along with their infant son. They had taken Simon in after he was found after a shipwreck had washed ashore, and the police and everybody couldn't find Simon's real parents. Simon tends to be really difficult. He definitely has behavioral issues. He skips school half the time, sometimes due to bullying, and sometimes I think just because he doesn't want to go. After Simon meets Carowind, he starts skipping school and going to her house during the day, and Joe has asked if that's all right if she just looks after him to make sure that he's safe. And she doesn't really agree. I'm pretty sure she says no, but he just keeps coming, and through just constantly coming over, she definitely has a soft spot for Simon after a while. Carowind also doesn't really open up to Joe the way he wants her to necessarily. He's very open with her in telling her about his past and what he wants for the future and such, and she's kind of doesn't really care, or it appears like she doesn't care, and he finds that hard to deal with because she's always acting very nonchalant about everything, and so there's some bickering a lot of the times of like, do you even care about me? Why are we friends? Things like that. It should note that throughout the book, Joe definitely catches feelings for Carowind. They start to grow, obviously, exponentially as this story goes on, and Carowind isn't showing the same sort of feelings for him outwardly. Because Simon is really difficult to deal with because he has so many behavioral issues, Joe takes it out on him in the form of physical abuse. At first, the abuse that Carowind sees I would equate to a spanking, kind of. Nothing, like, it's also set in 1980, so it's of a different time when people definitely still spanked their kids. I don't think it was spanking. I think it was maybe like a slap across the face or something. I can't really remember at this time. But it even kind of shocks Carowind for a second, and she's like, hey man, cool it. It wasn't that bad. That's kind of the first sign you get. But it doesn't happen all at once. And then eventually, not long after, one night, Simon shows up at Carowind's tower, and he is extremely bruised and battered. That part is obviously pretty gut-wrenching. It's also a little frustrating and difficult because Carowind doesn't do anything about it necessarily. She takes care of Simon, and eventually she calls out Joe on it, but she doesn't do anything beyond that. She doesn't report it to anybody. She doesn't tell anybody. And her reasoning is because she doesn't want to break up their family, because Joe and Simon have a really strong bond. The book is set up into 3 parts. Part 1 is the trio basically meeting. We're also getting introduced to all the characters and the town and like Joe's family and such. And it has a little mystery behind it with where does Simon come from? Who are Joe's family? Because in the first part, they're definitely shrouded in mystery, along with Carowind's family. Carowind is estranged, that's the word, from her family, and we don't know why. It's just that they don't speak, and she never wants to speak to them ever again. The second part was the slowest for me. It's basically the trio go on a road trip vacation to southern New Zealand, and it's a family area that she kind of grew up in, and I'm sure there was some importance to this part, but it was so slow for me that I think it either went over my head or it was, I don't know, maybe it just was slow. But I think it was meant for the trio to get closer together possibly and kind of heal after that display of abuse that was at the end of the first part. The third part is mainly about each one of the trio finding themselves in their own way. They all kind of have their own journey in the third part, and it's them finding out what they need in life. And there is some sudden magical realism in the third part. To me, it kind of came out of nowhere. There was some like Maori spirituality, I would say, with like gods and spirits and things like that, but it was more, those were more stories, like they were just stories that were told or things that Carowind said she felt she experienced. But in the third part, it is just straight up magical realism. And I don't mind magical realism, I enjoy it, but I felt like it came out of nowhere and I didn't like the end result of it. I don't want to say what it was because it's just a huge spoiler. There are definitely other things I struggled with in this book. I felt that Carowind was a little bit of a Mary Sue in such that she could basically do anything from drawing to playing the guitar to making any sort of food or wine to fighting. She can basically do everything and everything really, really well. I hated Joe. I don't know if you were really supposed to like him, so I'm okay with my hate for Joe, but I was just straight up hate zone for Joe. Simon needs intense therapy. His behavioral issues are so frequent and nobody knows how to, I don't want to say, I guess, deal with it in any sort of productive way. Carowind comes close because she actually listens to him, where nobody else in the world seems to listen to Simon, but he still really needs to go to a therapist. They even say, Joe talks about how they tried a therapy session with him once, but Simon and Joe basically just trolled the therapist the whole time and thought it was funny. So there was no real plan to go through with any therapy for Simon. There are a lot of Maori phrases and sentences throughout this book, and the author put a translation in the back, so you just go to the page number that you're on and then you can find the sentences and words translated there. I obviously liked that. I wanted to know what they're saying, but I felt like it would have been better if it was a footnote. I don't know if that's a personal preference, but when I'm reading and there's a couple sentences of Maori, it's like you're like, okay, let me get. I mean, I ended up having a second bookmark back here so I can easily jump. And then I'd be like, okay, which one? Okay. You know, that kind of situation where for me, I guess just the ease of reading, it would have been nicer just to have some footnotes at the bottom. I don't know if that's nitpicky or not. The writing itself is very beautiful. There's poetry and songs mixed in, and the description she writes about the New Zealand scenery is just so perfect and real. I really felt like I was there. I could picture it perfectly. Everywhere they traveled, I felt like I was there. I also really like the way she wrote about Carowind's depression and how it feels to be stuck in your craft and not feeling like you're ever good enough. I obviously Keri has definitely experienced a lot of those feelings. And there's a lot of, scenes of Carowind being alone, talking to herself. And it was very real to me, and I think she did a really good job. Also, there's a lot of speculation, and I can totally see it, of Carowind basically being Keri Hulme. Their names are almost the same in a way. The author and Carowind are both part Maori, part European. The character Carowind and the author are both asexual, and they're both recluses. I know the author definitely likes to be alone and doesn't like to live in a populated area. So you can definitely see the similarities if you've read about the author a little bit before reading this book. All in all, The Bone People gets a 3 out of 5 for me. I thought it was beautifully written. It was very emotional. It's heartbreaking at times. I really did love the characters of Carowind and Simon, but it felt a little too long in some places, and the ending was a little too much for me, and it ended up ruining some of the progress the characters had made throughout the other parts of the book. Okay, time for some quick stats. The Bone People was published in 1983. I would consider it general fiction literature. It's set in New Zealand and is 450 pages. Thank you for coming to hang out with me while I reviewed The Bone People. I hope you're able to join me next time when I review Winterwood. See ya.